intro first. Okay. So, welcome to the Regenerative Design channel. We from Regenerative Design believe that sustainability is the only first step towards the transformation we need for a more just and healthier future. Regeneration is our direction, our horizon, and our path. It is an existential diagram that moves us to act in a more conscious and responsible way. In addition to all the actions and services we offer here at Regenerative Design Channel, our goal is to share knowledge, perspectives, references, practices, and learnings about the regeneration paradigm so that together we can transform the world into a better place. We believe in the potential of regenerative design to create innovative and effective solutions capable of generating profound positive impact on reality. Our theme today is incorporating regeneration into daily practices. And we can't have anyone better to talk about this than Carol Sanford. Today we're here with Carol Sanford, a renowned disruptor and contrarian. She's noted for her work with executives from Fortune 500 and new economy companies in driving systemic business transformation. She leverages educational programs, human development work, and her best-selling books to inspire leaders to change the nature of work, focusing on people, development, and constant innovation. She has collaborated with industry giants like Google, DuPont, Intel, P&G, and Seventh Generation. She is the founder and designer of the Regenerative Business Development Community and the Regenerative Change Agent Development Community, fostering collaborative learning amongst global leaders and change agents. Carol's an award-winning author. She has written 6 books, and her books are compulsory reading at prestigious business schools, including Harvard, Stanford, Haas School of Business at Berkeley, and MIT. They cover themes of work design, cultivating human potential, entrepreneurship, and regenerative business practices. At the end of our session, we will provide you with all the information you need about how to buy these books. She is also recognized as a top conscious business leader. She has received accolades like the Thought Leader Lifetime Achievement Award and the Athena Award. Currently, she serves as an executive in residence and senior fellow in social innovation at Babson College. Sanford's unconventional, forward-thinking approach has modernized old practices and continues to offer extraordinary business outcomes. She's the granddaughter of a Mohawk and has knowledge and practice in ancient and deep lineage practices and sacred traditions. So welcome, Carol. It's wonderful to have you here.
I'm very glad to be here, Tanya. Thank you.
Great. Also here tonight is Cassiana. Cassiana is the mother of Kawau. I said that wrong, I think.
Kauai.
Kauai, that's it. Cassiana is the mother of Kauai, a designer and consultant in regenerative futures. She is certified and practices strategic foresight, as well as being a network entrepreneur, a decision she made after nearly 20 years of working at Volkswagen in Brazil. As a futures researcher for over 13 years, she focuses on the futures of work and business, learning and relationships, converging all these fields of study together at Lifelong Workers and Nortas. She is also the creator and facilitator of the Personal Futures Design Journey, and one of the few in Brazil and the world. She collaborates on the YouTube channel of Regenerative Design, designregenerativo.org, and co-facilitates the Regenerative Leadership course at the School of Regeneration with Flavia Vivacqua, who is also here with us today backstage. And I am Tanya Sturgio. I am an organizational designer, I'm a facilitator, and I'm a partner at Target Teal. I have over 20 years of experience as a designer and facilitator in the field of org design and collaboration. I am passionate about supporting organizations in making the transition to self-managed responsive systems where people work together to strengthen not only the organization, but their relationships as well, so that they can generate results that create emancipatory systems so people can emancipate themselves and create safe and fulfilling work environments. So that is what I have for you today, people. We are going to do an interview with Carol. We have prepared some questions, a series of questions for Carol. But before we get into those questions, I would like to hand this off to Cassie, which will be doing the most part of the interviewing. I might step in once in a while to ask a couple things, but I would like to hand things off to Cassie now. Cassie.
Hi, how are you, everybody? Thank you very much. And it's a big pleasure to have Carol Sanford here. Just to let you know about what's going on here, we are going to talk to Carol about many things, but mainly about No More Feedback. Oh, yeah, No More Feedback. It's one of her books, but it's just one because there are so many questions we'd like to address to her that it's not the only thing, right? And to start, Carol, we'd like to know, who's Carol Sanford metaphorically?
Well, I'm not a big fan of metaphors, but I can tell you that my grandfather, when I was very young, said that I needed to realize I was a positive contrarian. It meant I saw the world differently than everyone else did. I always saw the gaps and the holes and a way to view it that no one did. But what I saw was even more positive than what people were doing. Let me give you a quick example. Yeah, Tanya said, we think sustainability is only the first step. I think sustainability is the first wrong step on the way to regeneration. It's a path that is used to reduce harm, not to really create the essence of what needs to be created. So my grandfather would say, I can see that people chose a path that was filled with errors, and they don't know that yet. They keep thinking it's on the same thing or on the way to something. And yet I think that unless we start with and stay with the essence of living beings, we can't regenerate, because that's where life is. So that's who I am based on my grandfather's naming. That makes sense?
Totally. If it makes sense for you, it makes sense for us, for sure. And based on your extensive experience of over 40 years in regeneration in different contexts and having authored 6 globally referred well-known books, what do you consider to be the essential elements of regenerative work? Given the limited presence of regenerative practices and initiatives in Brazil over the past 15 years, how can these elements be effectively applied in this context here?
Okay, so you can't use the word elements and be talking about regeneration at all. Elements is fragments, where you have, and nothing in regeneration starts with fragmentation. So I would share with you the 7 first principles of regeneration, which come through the Mohawk and Iroquois nations, and have been adopted a great deal even in Australia through Tyson Yunkaporta's work. And so they go like this, and they're not elements, they aren't separate, they're a system. So the first one is everything about regeneration begins with wholes, W-H-O-L-E. And if you begin with the quote element or a fragment, you're not going to get to regeneration. Once you see a whole, like a whole neighborhood, a whole child, a whole life shed, now you ask, what is the essence of that particular child or a particular life shed? Because there's no categories of life sheds. That would be elements again. There is, each one is singular. Now, when you're able to look at the life shed as its essence being singular, now the next thing you can do is look at its potential. Potential is not generic, it's specific to a whole. And so the life shed I live in, instead of watershed, which is an element of a life shed, you have to go to the specific. Now, there are 7 of those, but that would take a long time. So the first 2 are the ones that are usually forgotten and don't get whole essence and potential. Should we stop there and say that's the launch point of regeneration?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. And
Sure.
I'd like to share a quick and valuable insight with our audience here, especially for those who may not be familiar with the brilliant book, No More Feedback. This book revolves around the idea of learning to trust ourselves and developing the ability to observe our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. What else would you add to pique our viewers' interest?
Okay, No More Feedback is a way of saying, and my 7th book, which will be out this fall, built on it. It's saying that what we do is assume behaviorism is the way people work. They get external feedback, external rewards, external incentive, and all those are completely wrong about how humans work. And the more we give people external feedback, the less they can see themselves. That when you keep, excuse me a second, I have shortness of breath sometimes. When you continually get feedback from your parents or your teachers, you are diminishing the capacity of you to see yourself. And I've spent almost 50 years now with companies and the schools and organizations teaching them that if people learn to do this for themselves, it's more powerful. It produces more money, more creativity. If you stop all feedback, all of it, not some, not make it general, not make people be able to use it, but understand the feedback is an antithesis of how we are created as humans to work, to be able, and it happened in the 1900s, 1905, when behaviorism was introduced and said humans can't see themselves. And most people still believe that. They believe it has to come from outside. But it turns out the more it comes from outside, the less each person can do, the less each child can understand themselves, each student, each employee. So that's hopefully that piques a bit of interest. You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Sorry. It's one of the things that I live every day. I work and part of my time in a company that we totally agree that there's no need for feedbacks. So your book just amazed us. Like, wow, like the ideas that support, why not doing like this, but mainly like getting in touch with yourself at first is really great. We know many people and leaders in organizations have been trying very hard to create a better world for diverse stakeholders, including nature. But at the same time, mental health issues have still increased over and over among the workforce at all levels, right? As you start on chapter 1 of your book, No More Feedback, I thought this coming question is quite thought-provoking, everybody, and I really would like to bring it. It's a Carol's question, actually, okay? And I'd like to hear from you, directly from you, Carol. Why is it that organizational leaders and people in general have such difficult recognizing the negative impacts of their business practices and work designs?
Well, we're blind to what we don't know about. And the major reason is that when behaviorism was introduced, it was very cleverly done. And so it's believed to be the only philosophy to run a business by. And here's the story. As I said, in 1905, there was a group of psychologists at Johns Hopkins and a bit before that who wanted to become famous and seen as scientists, like physics, and they wanted psychology to have a big name. So not out of evil, but out of misdirection, they created an idea called animal psychology. And one of the founders, the major founder, John Watson, had studied with Pavlov. And you probably heard of Pavlov, who taught dogs to salivate by when they got their food by ringing a bell. And that became the basis of behaviorism and psychology of humans. It was not tried on humans. It was transferred from animals. And they first went to education, because education was just being made mandatory across the US and eventually in Europe too. And probably Australia, although I don't have the data on that. What they did was got all the schools to adopt behaviorism, where the teachers didn't even become the experts. The psychologists out of behavioral psychology became experts to the teachers. And then they took that, and that made kids had nothing to say. They were always graded by somebody else. Then they went to the military and then to business. And by the 1950s, all human endeavors were assumed to be unintelligible to humans themselves. They needed external people, and they had no inner being, no ability to see themselves. And that process became dominant in every institution. And behavioral psychologists, if you just look around, became the dominant expert. And so they established the idea that the profession itself needs experts from psychology. And they built their name. The school is, there's behavioral economics, behavioral everything now. And so when you ask a question about how do people, business leaders, not see their effect, because they were conditioned not to by psychology being applied to every field of endeavor, and was saying you need experts, it's not you. So the business leaders go to the psychologists, and now we have a mess, because everything is assumed to need a behavioral expert. So I'm sorry for all the business leaders. It's hard to get that out of your head. In fact, almost everybody I talk to says, but I learned so much from feedback. Well, maybe, but most of it's projection. And we even know that now. It's not in the person that's being given the feedback. It's in the person giving the feedback. And so it's a mess for the giver and the receiver.
Yeah, for sure. And we can realize that. It's, as I said before, as we work at Nortos, for example, with this kind of process, just to realize ourselves by I myself, trying to link the points, the dots, we can just realize things that we could never realize if someone were just told me, right? So it's very great.
Well, and they always give us something we need to change, with a few sprinkled in good things, quote unquote, good things. And the whole idea of being able to develop ourselves is very foreign. You have to create a different culture in a company where you're always growing people on being able to think for themselves, a different epistemology, a non-expert. I am the expert on me. And so you have to build a culture, and that's what I've shown people how to do for about 40 years, which is build a company that is developing people, not controlling and managing them from the outside. It's a lot of work to change it, because you have to change the mind that's working on it. Did you freeze?
I think Cassie did. Maybe Cassie froze. And I think I can continue. I don't know, maybe she's coming back here. Did you freeze? No, you have not frozen. So
Okay, you and I can talk for a minute.
yes,
She'll be back.
we can talk. Let me see. There must be, we have a series of questions for you here. And let me see which one I would like to ask you now. There's so many questions. So Carol, regarding regenerative business, what kind of practices have you observed in evolutionary systems thinking, especially related to human development? Like we had said before, in Brazil, we don't have many examples, and to hear about cases or hear about these examples is very inspiring. So if you could maybe.
One of the major practices, and my new book has the epistemology of regeneration, and one of the things I talk about early is you have to have a ritual of development, not of teaching people what to do, but you're growing people how to manage their own thinking. So every company I've been a part of runs at least a monthly, and sometimes more often, half day or day, developing critical thinking skills, system thinking, essence thinking, and a lot of inner development, learning to watch yourself, and then doing that in a particular way, which is not as training, but as exploration. And so people are getting their own discovery, not getting programs or practices given to them. And they do that in natural work teams. By that I mean, whoever you work with every day, they come to these recurring sessions together, not as a bunch of scattered people in a room, and they're applying it to their work immediately. There are also things like core teams and market field teams where people are learning to understand the market, in not to impose their products on them, but to do what the customer or consumer needs. And so you're working in these recurring sessions to build the capacity to be able to serve that which we learn to see better. So those are, and there's another one I should mention, reflection. This is done in almost no business, where at the beginning, I have a lawnmower or a leaf blower. Can you hear it outside my window? Okay, good. All right, so reflection is where we learn to reflect on seeing our thinking and helping others to do so at the beginning and end of meetings. So, Cassie, glad to have you back. You should tell her, Tanya, what we worked on while she was gone.
Carol's bringing some practical experience about how we, how can we bring into regenerative business. Let me tell you the question that we have regarding regenerative business is, what kind of practices have you observed? So especially related to human development. And so she was talking a little bit about that.
Okay.
And Carol, I wanted to ask you one other question that is connected to this question. I know, like, we're focusing a lot on human development and these frameworks for people being able to observe themselves and how they think and learn from that. But I also have observed from your work that that is not the only thing that you look at. You really take a systemic approach to things. You're looking at the people, and you're also looking at the processes and this organizational aspect as well. And these two things, not these two things, but I guess these elements, if I were to separate organization and people, they obviously can't be separated, and you definitely don't do that, but you do a really good job of bringing these two things together. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, and much more. I do 3 to 5 years. I'm so sorry for this leaf blower. It's driving me crazy. I work with companies for 3 to 8 years, and we do it in an unfolding way. We start with strategic thinking, and how do you learn to think regeneratively with strategy? And you don't start by surveying the outside world. You start with being able to understand the users and their lives and the earth and its needs and society and how it works and your own essence and how you take the essence of a company and embed it in the business. Then the next couple of years is all about leadership and how you learn to build not leaders, but leadership among everyone, and learn how to change an industry from your own company, and how to understand competitors in a way you can build an industry, and also how you look at stakeholders and culture and all the things that have to be woven in. And during all of this, we're working on self-observing, self-remembering, reflecting, and watching ourselves while we work on all those. Ultimately, the last 3 or 4 years, we do work on work design, restructuring a company, restructuring work without incentive, no reward, no behaviorism, just how it is people could all work based on what I call promises beyond ableness, which it means every employee, including the CEO, is making a promise to a customer or market to do something that will advance their success. So that takes a few years. So I don't have training within a subject matter at all. It's all about how the company works, the future work like Cassie you're talking about.
Thanks, Carol. That's great. I think I'm going to pass it on to Cassie. I think maybe we can go for one of the final questions that we were thinking about. What do you think, Cassie?
Yes, I have one more question before the last one.
Okay.
But talking about practice, how about your last book called Indirect Work? Could you please tell us a little bit? We are curious, and one of the most demanding questions from our audience is about practices. It seems to be the case of this book, am I right?
Can you hear that, leaf blower? It's drowning me out here. I'm glad you can't hear it. All right. Indirect Work is my next to last book. My last one will be out in a couple of months. But it has the same concept. Okay, Einstein, you know him, or you may not know him, but you know who I mean. He said, when you don't have a quantum view, you have a outdated mechanistic view. And what he meant was, he described, I knew one of his students when I was at Berkeley who answered the question for me, what did Einstein mean? And he said, if we use our old paradigm and try and design the new world, we can't get there. He said, it's the difference between a billiard ball view and a quantum view. All right, the billiard ball we use is direct work, where you look at the light and business like a billiard ball table or pool table, which has pockets in it. And you think you're in charge of the table, and you pick which pocket people should be in, and you get your cue stick and you hit the cue ball to direct people into a pocket you've decided they should be in. That's direct work, where you're in charge of moving them with your impact. He said we have to learn to have indirect work. And indirect work is a mother carrying a child to term and delivering a baby where she knows she's not in charge at all. The system and the baby is choosing its own time to be born. Unless you induce labor, and now you're using a Newtonian pool table view. What he meant by indirect was working on capability, culture, and consciousness. Because if you trying to do the pool table view without capability, you're constantly correcting and redirecting like you're in charge. But if you build capability and capacity of all the people in your family or school or business, they will choose when and what to birth. The culture will create what needs to happen, and consciousness will be developed in people so they direct their own choices. So it's direct to indirect, Newtonian to quantum, and if we can get over on the indirect side and build capability, culture, and consciousness, we will have amazing companies, society, and if we try and be direct, we're constantly trying to manipulate people to our vision. So that's one way of describing indirect work.
Yes, talking to you and reading many of your articles and some books, I've just thought one day, what is it maturity for in this word? I mean, the seniority, of course, I'm not talking about this superiority, right? Of course, it has nothing to do with regeneration, but about the wisdom that we've got along our life. How does it come in your mind when we are discussing about that everyone should realize for themselves? And how do you see it?
Well, I'm not quite sure I have your question right, so tell me if I'm going off in the wrong way. I believe we as humans have an enormous capacity that's undeveloped. It's because of the control and manipulation and behaviorism, we have most humans who are not ever in a real development world. And that means if they don't go off to like a Hindu or Tibetan or Sufi or something development process, they don't learn about their inner life and inner being. I believe when we start developing people and as a part of their work, as a part of their life, that it awakens something that's possible for humans now to be fulfilling the role they need to fulfill. And for me, I think humans are a keystone species which are failing terribly because they're not learning to develop that inner being and the consciousness that's needed to do in the world what's needed. So for me, that's really my life's work, to help humans understand they have a key role, and that's not about deciding for missions and visions. It's about bringing consciousness into fields of energy where creativity is happening and developing people. Is that kind of like what you're asking about?
Yeah, just great. Sorry, Tanya?
No, just was checking if that was good for you, if that answer was what you were looking for, not looking for, but if that was okay.
Yeah, just come.
Yeah.
Tanya has a last question for you.
Okay.
Well, we can also maybe, but I have one more question, but maybe you have another question to add too. That's okay. But we would really like to end this conversation talking about conscious dying. And I don't necessarily want to ask a specific question because it's what I can say is we've been looking at this movement, this conscious dying movement that's going on, and it's so beautiful and it's so moving and it's and I would like just to open it up for you to talk about it and what's alive for you. What would you like to share with us about conscious dying and this movement that's going on?
So when I found out I had been diagnosed with ALS, most people kept saying to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "I'm not. I believe I chose how I would die before I was born. And I believe I'd known all my life that I had some different ideas about dying because I'd worked in hospitals. But even then, I felt like in the Western world, the English-speaking world, there was really broken ideas. And I could see in Tibetan and Hindu and other cultures and indigenous that dying was conceived of differently. And I decided to dedicate my remaining lunch years. It's turned out to be about 9 years. But I didn't know I had ALS most of that time. That my work was to create a way to see someone dying publicly, but in a way they could grow me and grow everyone around me. So I formed conscious dying workshops, and people attend those who are in my communities already, where we're recording them so that people can learn more about a different culture, a different group work, community work, and work for the dying person. And people can buy recordings of those and follow us. I am planning to, probably not many months from now, I haven't picked a time, but I'm losing my ability to speak and be heard and understood. I can't walk already. I'm starting to have trouble eating and swallowing. And yet every day I'm running my workshops for growing communities. How can communities think about death as a developmental practice? And if people want to see about that, they could go look at seed-communities. We'll have you put it so they can find it. They can read more about the conscious dying. The other thing that I've done is I'm writing a blog and podcast on Substack. And there what I'm doing is thinking, when you get to be my age, 80 plus a little, you begin to see so many things differently and think, why didn't I see that when I was younger? And so I have a new podcast and journal called Positive Contrarian. And so it's taking subjects like problem solving and showing why they're making a mess of schools and child rearing and businesses and how to switch. So if you're interested, you can check out the conscious dying and the Substack that are trying to switch people's, not switch, but open a different view. And so conscious dying to me, I'm not afraid of death at all. I never have been. But I do believe that it has more meaning than we normally give it. We normally try and do nice things for the person who's dying, which aren't even very helpful. And so I'm trying to offer some different practices and different ways to enter and different, what I call 3 lines of work for the individual, for the community they're in, and for the culture and worldview they have. So we invite anyone who'd like to know more about that. I get breathless after talking a while. It gets hard to breathe and talk, so sorry. Hopefully this is understandable.
It is, Carol.
It
It is
was.
understandable. It's
Mhm.
great. And we'll definitely add that at the end of the at the end of our interview, we'll add all that information
Okay.
about, yeah, conscious dying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here. So it was an amazing time with you, quite inspiring quotes as always. I know that sometimes you say, "Oh, don't mention me, don't listen to me," and even
Yeah.
that, I think it's so so different, and it's you really inspire us even in that, like, oh, don't put all the lights on me. And thank you everybody for your whole work, and we are really, really happy to have you here. So
Well,
that's
thank you
it,
for
Tanya.
inviting me.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carol. You are definitely an example of coherence, which I think is what we really need these days. And that's so wonderful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure speaking to you, and take care. Thank you so much.
I would say take risks. It's a lot more fun.
That's better. I like that. Let's go
Yeah.
with that. Take risks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye,
Bye.
Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We are going to stop the recording.